All right, welcome to the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So today I'm going to do a subject. Basically, it's about living outside your means, and I get it because for the majority of my life, I think I've done that to a certain point. No matter how much money I made, I had to spend more, or I needed more possessions. I don't know if it was an insecurity, but I call it keeping up with the Jagoffs instead of the Joneses, because I think that's what most of our society has become. That no matter what we have, it's never enough, or we're constantly comparing ourselves to others. And I'm all about wanting more. I get that part of it, wanting more for, out of your life, wanting more for your kids, wanting more for your parents, just wanting more in general. I think it's almost the American way. It's the way we're programmed. But if you've ever been to Italy or different cultures, a lot of times they just have a different outlook on life. It's not just obviously about possessions. It's really about the way you live your lifestyle, right, to a certain degree. And especially the Italians, because that's where my background is. So it was very interesting when I seen the way I kind of grew up with being raised slightly by immigrant Italian grandparents. And what they thought was, I guess you could say, an unbelievable lifestyle, living in Chicago, right near Cicero. My grandfather had like one of those, I guess you could say brownstones. Typical Chicago living. And he thought, he lived almost like, in his mind, like a millionaire. He had his garden in the backyard. And I didn't realize until I got older what type of poverty he came from Italy and Naples. And where he ended up really was unbelievable. I kind of grew up in two different sides of a family. One being very, I'd say middle or lower middle class, and one being upper, on the much wealthier side. My mother's was a little lower. They were a little harder for them. A lot of my family members were painters. And on my father's side, they were designers, owned some of the largest garment factories in Chicago. They just, most of them had, summer homes. They had Cadillacs. They lived in wealthy areas. They traveled, had condos in South Florida. And my other side, not so much. So, total different, parallels there. But my point now. So, living outside your means, or really trying to keep up with the Joneses, I think what people have to realize more than anything is learn to save money. You always think you're going to make a lot more money. Sometimes, I guess you could say, you always think money is always going to be coming in, which it may. In your mind, a lot of times I think people think they're always going to become more and more successful when that's not the case. They also think the economy may stay a certain way, and it doesn't. And they just don't really learn how to manage money. And I was one of those people. I still have issues with this because I like certain things. And if I just go after them and get them if I'm in the mood. Other times I could be very frugal. Other times I'm not. I don't know why it is like that for me. But I'm going to tell you one thing. It's not being cheap. What did my buddy say the other day? One of my buddies who actually owns a law firm, when he was going through hard times at different times in his life, when he was younger, he's like, you could call me broke, but don't you ever call me cheap. Which I always found quite interesting because it was absolutely true. He was such a big giver, but he was kind of always broke, but you couldn't call him cheap. He ended up wealthy. I'm not going to get into that. But, you really got to learn how to manage money, or really teach your kids that if you have kids. My mother was always preaching that to me, but I made a lot of money when I was younger, legally and illegally, truthfully. I came out of the gate. My father owned a very large vending business. All we did was deal with money. And then I started doing other things to make money, which included gambling and all these different things. So at a very, very young age, I didn't go to college. I just wanted to make money. And I remember, like, in my early 20s, even my mid-20s, I had Rolexes, I had a Caddy, a Lincoln, I lived in a gated community. I had tons of different things, and then I had a daughter, and she ended up having to have a liver transplant. It was a life-altering thing, even financially, which who cares, as long as my daughter's fine, which she is. But a lot of things may come into your life that are unexpected. That could go for your parents, yourself physically. If you're married, your kids. I never expected to have a daughter to have a liver transplant. I also never expected to have another daughter with diabetes 1. I know that's kind of extreme. What are the odds of me having 2 children go through that? But the truth is it happened. And most likely you're going to go through things in your life that are going to be life-altering too, most likely, because we're all, for the most part, going to run into things financially where it changes. It could become very successful, or the hammer comes down and you lose a lot of money in investments. Most people lose. Not as many people win, as you could tell, the 1%ers. So my mother would always preach, please save some money, save money. And I didn't save nearly as much money as I should have. And I also spent tons of money on things that were crazy, especially on my kids, especially on parties, traveling, on homes, on all these different things. And things would happen. Even the economy would change. The housing market would change. And truthfully, I think a lot of people are brilliant at doing things with money and making money off of money and investments, but a majority of people aren't. I don't think they're educating it because I don't think our system really educates us. And I think, at least I can speak for myself, my father was a nightclub owner and a vendor, and vending as far as gaming. He knows the bar, nightclub, gentlemen's club industry very well. Unbelievable. But as far as investing in properties or investing in stocks, bonds, that's not his forte. My mother neither. She basically worked for the archdiocese. She's an unbelievable cook, chef. And my mother's a great saver. What's amazing is after my mom and dad got a divorce, she's great at saving, just not making. My dad was great at kind of making and not saving. And I think that's kind of what happened in my first marriage as well. I loved spending tons of money, and actually my ex-wife was wonderful. She was at the beginning pretty good at saving money, but then we ended up both being big spenders, and that kind of leads you down a whole different road. But I've spent the majority of my life still going out. I travel all over the place, still spend a ton of money on restaurants. I backed up on clothing. I love fashion, so I kind of dipped into more consignment or vintage clothing. I do that. So that's been a big saver for me. Instead of buying full retail or designer clothing like I used to, I kind of realized clothing is disposable. And if you really look at a closet, it's kind of a lot of money inside of a closet that's kind of dead inventory, I tell people, especially women. But I teach that in a program of mine, Mastering Self-Confidence with Men, is really spend your money where it's really going to work out better for you, not spending $100,000 and you have a great wardrobe, which I'm saying is wonderful, but it's just sitting in a closet. It's really not doing anything else for you. Also with fashion or anything else, it's kind of going in and out of style. That's a whole nother podcast, but back to keeping up with the Joneses, I think we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, and that's how we rate ourselves emotionally, and I think social media now more than ever has a big part of that. You see people on how their lifestyle is and what they're doing, and a lot of people are making it look a lot better than it really is. They don't show you all the stress involved with a lot of their lifestyle. So a lot of people your friends, family members, and all that may have big homes. I call it, what do they call it? Sorry, I don't call it. What do they call that? House poor, where a lot of them have big homes. They have luxury cars. They don't have 10 cents in the bank. They're stressed. They're fighting to stay above water. They're financing everything. All these type of things. For what? I have no idea. No ideas. I think a lot of times people with families, they do want to live in better areas, and I get that 100%. But if it puts a lot of stress on you, your relationship, even your kids, is it really worth it? I mean, and again, I get we all want to be in a better place, I think a lot of times, than how we grew up. Or on the other end, we want to maintain what our parents gave us, right? So I see it kind of go both ways, because I've been around thousands of people that were very poor, in the middle, and extremely wealthy. And, if you grew up with poverty or something lower, you want way more than what you had for your kids, right? If you're kind of middle class, you want to at least maintain middle class for your kids. And then a lot of people that grew up in a way upper middle class, I think they want to obviously sustain that, right? They don't want to kind of go down a notch or two to say middle class if you're upper middle class. And I think that happens to a lot of people, because a lot of people aren't sometimes as smart as their parents, or they made a lot of mistakes when they were younger, or your parents may have, for instance, gotten inheritance that you haven't gotten yet, or Your parents may, at this point, they have a lot more years on you, depending on what age you are. So if they're 30, 40 years older than you, of course they're going to most likely sometimes have things now that you don't have. So, and I remember my mother saying that to me when I was younger, to my father. They'd come over because I had, at that time, I was very young, and I had a big, beautiful home and cars and all these things. And my mother's like, look all he has compared to what we had. We had, this, and look what he has, and all these things. Which was quite interesting, because my father then became pretty wealthy, and he had way more than even I had what my mother was talking about. I only knew my father for the most part. I mean, he owned a nightclub, but really being successful with the big, beautiful homes, boats, sports cars, and all this. And then my mom's kind of talking about my dad when he was my age, and he didn't have these things. And I almost wanted to keep on par with what my father was at that point in time, and me. I wanted to be kind of on his level, and I'm, 25 years younger. I wasn't thinking about what he had at my age, nor did I care. I just wanted more. And I think I had a lot of insecurities with possessions, and it's funny because now I'm almost the opposite. I don't want any possessions, which is kind of ridiculous in its own right, but when I was younger, I felt like the more I purchased or the more I had, the more it fulfilled me. And you hear these goofy things about celebrities. I'm not saying I'm a celebrity, but the more they get, the more they're fulfilled. And before you know it, that's what's fulfilling you, which I found quite interesting. And that was my case, which actually after a while just kind of felt like all these anchors. And like, even if I had to move from one house to the other, I'm like, my God, it just cost me $10,000 for movers. Am I out of my fucking mind? Like, why do I need a 15-foot armoires? Why do I need, California king beds? Why do I need 2, 3 cars? Why do I have 3 cars and there's only 2 of us driving them? I used to just buy luxury cars so when family members would visit me, they can take a car. And then I started to do a lot of crazy shit, even have a limo driver. He owned a company, and then we used to do certain things, and he owed us some money, a bunch of money. So I basically had a limo driver at my access. And I realized all these things to just keep proving myself as a human being to others it was more about that than it was actually me being happy, which a lot of things do make you happy, don't get you wrong. It's almost like when you buy something new, you're very excited, and then after a while, it's just another object, right? It really is like that. But the reason I want to do this podcast is really, don't get caught up with what anyone else is doing. And I try to teach this a lot in my programs, and really just concentrate on what makes you happy. And if getting a monster home, $1 million home is what's going to make you happy, make sure that's what's going to make you happy. Because I tell people, a lot of people don't understand, when they get certain things, they don't realize all the shit that comes along with that. Maintaining it. Now, if you're a multi-millionaire, you can do whatever you want, but most people aren't. So again, they get these possessions, or they get a lot of things. They don't realize they have to maintain these things. They don't realize the taxes consistently with them. Even if it's a monster home, cleaning it. If you have a pool person, landscapers, and all the different things breaking down and just keeping up with it. And then they get the furniture for it. And I know this sounds kind of crazy because I'm bitching about somebody having a big home, but you don't, even painting it, interior, exterior, all these different things. Make sure it's what you want, because I think a lot of people, what they think they want and they get, it's not always what you want. Like, if you want a big house, go do one for like an Airbnb or something for like a month or two, or test certain things. I used to say that about sports cars too, as I knew tons of guys that own beautiful cars, and they said, Rich, after a month or two, they're nothing. Like, I want to go trade them in and get something new, because I've kind of showed my friends off, and they were right. Like, I'd go rent sports cars or luxury cars for like a couple weeks or a month before I committed to them. And what was funny is, by the end, even my ex-wife, I'd be like, what do you think of that? She's like, I liked it. I'm like, we almost brought that car. She's like, yeah, I would have liked it, but I think I want something else. And I'm like, yeah. Like, really think about what you want, what you really want, because a lot of times the smallest things in life are the things, I think, that make us the happiest. I realize, and that could be even a good cup of coffee. It could just be working out. It could be something like a good meal, obviously. Small things, taking your kids to do certain things, having the freedom to go to their games if they're in baseball or hockey, having enough money to, maintain maybe if they're in dance, whatever it is, not where you have to put yourself in a position where you have to have 2 jobs, where you have to work 70, 80 hours a week, where you have to have double income, and if one of you doesn't work or something happens, it all crumbles. And I've been in all those situations, and it's funny how they say, wisdom's wasted on the old. It's kind of really true, because it's not only wisdom, it's what you live through, I believe. So unless you live through it, you don't understand it. Just like I don't understand what it is to be 80 years old. I didn't understand what it was to be 50, now that I'm going on 50. But all the different things that happened to that point, it's not just what I learned, it's what I went through. It's emotionally what it took a toll on me, and me figuring out who I am and what do I really want, right? A lot of us, we really think we know what we want till we get it. And it's kind of like I always said a lot of times, like sometimes restaurants, you want to always try a new restaurant, or you always wanted to go do this for vacation, or go try this, and you went and did it, and it really wasn't up to what you thought it was going to be, right? It could be even taking on a new business venture. You're like, I always wanted to do this my whole life, or I want to get this degree, I want to do this, then you got it, and you're like, now what do I do with this? It wasn't what I thought it was. Make sure you don't make mistakes, especially with possessions, purchasing things outside of your means, especially homes, businesses, cars. Really try to get around people that are successful, or people that have done it and have an honest approach at that, because everything looks great from the outside. I remember when I was making films, I thought filmmaking would be fulfill me to the fullest. After I made a few films, I'm like, this is fucking exhausting, and it's aggravating me now. I still wouldn't mind making a film, don't get me wrong, but I definitely don't want to be in a position where it just took so much out of me and I didn't enjoy doing it anymore. Maybe if I had many more millions, but at the same time, I may have different stresses regarding time frames and all these other things, and having to balance all these other things that I just wasn't in the mood for anymore. And one thing I thought I would never do is write books, and then that really fulfilled me, even though I don't make a ton of money on my books. And that's why I created my programs, and I'm doing a podcast, because what's funny is I'd rather do like the podcast and me now shooting some videos. I really realized I love helping people more than anything else. That's really what I want to do. That's really what I feel like I was sent here to do, I guess you could say. Not just have big homes or not show off or all these other things. And I still love the better things in life, don't get me wrong, but it's not really who I am. I don't have to prove to people all the time what I'm doing. And I'm very fortunate, because the last, I don't know how many years, like just in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been able to visit over 500 different cities throughout North America. Not long ago, I was just in Italy. But my point being is, it's great. And I always said a lot of times when that's for work, but after you visit certain places more than 1 or 2 times, I realized there's only a few places I really want to be. You think all these other places are going to be very fulfilling, which at the beginning they are, because they're new. That's the only reason they're fulfilling. But eventually you keep going to certain places you don't necessarily want to be. You're where you're at because that's where you want to be. So you need to figure out in life, I tell people, where do you really want to be? And everything else is great, don't get me wrong. But again, you may go to these places, they're not as fulfilling as you think they are. Nothing wrong with testing them. But it's, again, committing. And that goes for people who want to move to different states, or even in college, take on certain degrees, or get in debt a lot of money. Make sure you don't consistently keep making those mistakes and setting yourself back. Test the waters a little bit. Don't, I tell people do things as slowly as possible, but just head in that direction. Because sometimes you got to be able to maneuver. It's kind of like an expressway. If you're kind of just chilling, if somebody pulls in front of you or something, you can kind of avoid an accident. If you're kind of going 100, 120 miles per hour, or even 90, and somebody pulls in front of you, and it's hard because it's fast. There's not a lot of time to think. And that doesn't mean you drive slow. Like slow drivers, I think, cause more accidents than fast. But that's a whole different thing. But I'm saying in life, just to make sure you're not caught up with what everyone else is doing. Just make sure you are happy with what you are doing. And I promise you, some of my buddies that have the least amount of possessions or trying to keep up with the Joneses are the happiest people I know, because I really believe it's not just stress-free, but they just have an aura about them that they seem to be happy with who they are. I have a friend like that in Florida. He just has a basic home. He always wanted a home with a pool. He's able to help his mother. He spends all his time with his son. They get to go to Disney, Universal, and he's just a nurse, and he's a wonderful father, and he is not caught up with all the bullshit. And, I have guys that are multi-millionaires that have so much stress coming out of their life. It's aging them. Everybody's constantly coming in for money. It's just really just balance that out. Figure out who you want to be and kind of go for it. So I actually got to take off here. I got to go to the gym myself. But I wish you guys nothing but the best. If you get a chance, listen to my, I got some YouTube channels out, Rich CELENZA. I have a Mastering Self-Confidence program out to help men find the women of their dreams or woman of their dreams, even if they've been through a bad breakup or divorce. But yeah, keep listening. I really appreciate you checking out my podcast. All right, take care.